You're not broken. And that's the most dangerous truth you've never been told. What you call your darkness might be the source of your power. And if you miss this, you'll keep fighting yourself for the rest of your life. You were taught to believe that growth means eliminating what's uncomfortable inside you. Anger, fear, desire, contradiction. Cut them out, suppress them, rise above them. But Carl Jung shattered that illusion with a radical idea. What you reject within yourself doesn't disappear. It takes control from the shadows. That's why so many intelligent, capable people still feel divided, stuck, or quietly exhausted. They're at war with parts of their own psyche. In the Serpent's struggle, Jung's symbolic vision of integration, you're about to see why true transformation doesn't come from choosing light over darkness, but from uniting them. Jung's vision of the two serpents reveals a counterintuitive truth. Wholeness isn't purity, it's integration. And once you understand this, the patterns that keep repeating in your life, relationships, emotions, self-sabotage, suddenly make sense. This isn't philosophy for academics. This is a psychological map for anyone who wants an authentic, meaningful life. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn isn't comfortable, but it's liberating. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You were trained to fight the wrong battles. From a young age, you learned how to compete, how to win arguments, how to survive the world out there. But no one ever sat you down and said, "Hey, the real battlefield is inside you." And yet, every sleepless night, every emotional overreaction, every pattern you swear you'll never repeat is proof that something deeper is moving within your unconscious. This is where the real struggle lives, between what you show the world and what you hide from yourself. Carl Jung understood this well. The war between light and darkness is not moral, it's psychological. And whether you like it or not, you're already in it. Inside you, two forces are constantly negotiating power. One wants order, clarity, control. The version of you that feels acceptable, productive, and admired. The other lives in the shadow. Anger you don't express, desires you judge, fears you suppress, talents you never dared to claim. You might think ignoring that side keeps you safe, but it doesn't. It just hands the steering wheel to the unconscious. Like a coiled serpent beneath the floorboards, the shadow waits. And when ignored long enough, it doesn't whisper, it strikes. This is why Jung said what we don't make conscious appears in our lives as fate. Think about it for a second. Have you ever reacted in a way that shocked even you? Said something you didn't mean? Sabotaged something you cared about? Pushed away someone who loved you? That wasn't random. That was the shadow demanding to be seen. Integration begins when you stop pretending that only the light deserves a voice. Wholeness isn't about becoming good, it's about becoming whole. And that means admitting that darkness is not a flaw in your design. It's part of the architecture of the self. There's a practical way to start noticing this inner battle without getting lost in it. Pay attention to your emotional spikes. When something triggers you disproportionately, pause and ask, what part of me is being touched right now? Journal it. No filters. Write what you'd never say out loud. This simple act shines light into the unconscious. Over time, you'll notice patterns, recurring fears, recurring resentments, recurring desires. That's not weakness. That's raw data for transformation. Books like Man and His Symbols by Jung can help you understand the symbolism behind these inner movements, giving language to what once felt chaotic. The moment you truly see this inner struggle, something shifts. You stop wasting energy fighting yourself, and you start listening instead. The battle doesn't end, but it changes form. The serpents don't disappear. They begin to circle one another differently. And just when you think this is where clarity settles in, you'll notice something unsettling. The darkness doesn't fade. It starts to change. And that's where the real mystery begins. At first, You believe darkness is something to get rid of. You tell yourself that if you think more positively, work harder, or fix yourself enough, the uncomfortable parts will disappear. But that's not how the psyche works. Darkness doesn't vanish under pressure. It adapts. Carl Jung's vision of the black serpent slowly turning white reveals a truth most people miss. Transformation doesn't happen by force. It happens by contact. When consciousness stays present long enough, even what resists it begins to shift its nature. Think of darkness like a locked room in your house. You can avoid it for years, walk past the door, pretend it's not there. But the moment you open it, even just a crack, you realize it's not empty. It's filled with memories, instincts, creativity, pain, and power. Some of it scares you, some of it surprises you, and some of it feels strangely familiar. This is the unconscious revealing itself, not as an enemy, but as raw material. Integration is the alchemy that turns this material into meaning. You've probably experienced this without naming it. A painful breakup that later became the reason you grew stronger. A failure that forced you to discover abilities you didn't know you had. A period of loneliness that sharpened your intuition and self-trust. In those moments, darkness didn't destroy you, it refined you. The shadow, once illuminated, stopped working against you and started working with you. That's the moment the black serpent begins to change color. Here's something practical you can do to support this shift. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What is this trying to develop in me?" It sounds simple, but it rewires how you relate to struggle. For example, if you're dealing with constant frustration at work, don't just look for escape, look for the hidden signal. Maybe it's pushing you to develop boundaries, assertiveness, or a new direction entirely. Darkness often carries the blueprint of your next evolution. As you stay with this process, you'll notice a strange paradox. The more you allow the shadow into awareness, the less threatening it feels. What once looked like chaos reveals an inner logic. And just when you start trusting this inner transformation, another realization creeps in. Something subtle but powerful. The shadow you're learning to face isn't just inside you, it's also showing up in the people around you. You were taught to fear the shadow, to treat it like a flaw or a moral failure. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The shadow isn't out to ruin you, it's trying to complete you. Every part of you that was ignored, shamed, or silenced didn't die. It went underground. And from there, it started influencing your choices in subtle ways. Carl Jung warned that when the shadow is denied, it doesn't disappear. It gains autonomy. That's when you feel out of control, even though nothing external seems wrong. Think of the shadow like a child locked in a basement. At first it cries, then it bangs on the walls. Eventually it finds another way to be heard, maybe through sarcasm, passive aggression, compulsive habits, or sudden emotional outbursts. You might call these bad habits, but psychologically, they're messages. The shadow isn't evil, it's injured, and injured parts don't need punishment, they need integration. Wholeness begins the moment you stop fighting these parts and start listening. You can see this clearly in everyday life. The person who prides themselves on being nice often carries unacknowledged rage. The hyper-rational thinker may hide deep emotional sensitivity. The endlessly productive achiever may be running from a fear of worthlessness. None of this makes you broken. It makes you human. The shadow is simply the sum of everything you were told not to be. And paradoxically, it often holds your creativity, vitality, and personal power. A simple way to work with this is to notice what you judge most harshly in yourself. Maybe it's laziness, jealousy, neediness, or ambition. Instead of suppressing it, ask, what healthy function might this serve if expressed consciously? For example, laziness might be a signal for rest or misalignment. Jealousy might point to unclaimed desires. Ambition might be energy that was never given a direction. By reframing the shadow this way, you turn inner conflict into usable insight. As you build this relationship with your shadow, something surprising happens. You stop wasting energy maintaining a false self. You feel more grounded, more real, more alive. But there's another twist Jung emphasized. Once you stop fighting the shadow inside, you start noticing it less aggressively outside. And that's where the mirror effect begins to reveal itself, whether you're ready or not. If you ever wondered why certain people irritate you instantly, here's the uncomfortable answer. It's rarely about them. Projection is the mind's favorite escape route. When something inside you feels too threatening, too shameful, or too powerful to face, the psyche quietly relocates it outward. Suddenly, the problem has a face, a name, a personality, and it's standing across from you. Carl Jung made this painfully clear. What you deny in yourself, you meet in others, over and over again. Think of projection like emotional graffiti. Your unconscious writes on the walls of other people, and you swear they did it themselves. The arrogance you can't stand, the weakness you despise, the chaos you judge, it often mirrors something unintegrated within you. This doesn't mean the other person is innocent or perfect. It means your emotional charge reveals more about your inner landscape than about their behavior. The stronger the reaction, the stronger the projection. You've probably lived this already. Maybe there's someone you can't tolerate at work, and no matter what they do, it pushes your buttons, or a public figure that triggers instant rage or admiration. Pause and ask yourself, what part of me is being activated here? Sometimes it's a trait you secretly possess. Other times, it's a quality you wish you had the courage to express. Projection works both ways. We project not only what we hate, but also what we admire but haven't owned. Here's a grounded practice you can actually use. The next time you feel an intense emotional reaction towards someone, don't act immediately. Take a mental step back and list the traits you're reacting to. Then ask, where does this live in me, even in a small or distorted form? This isn't about blame, it's about reclaiming energy. When you pull projections back home, you stop leaking power into the external world and start building inner authority. As projections dissolve, relationships change, conflicts lose their charge, admiration becomes inspiration instead of envy. You begin to see people more clearly and yourself more honestly. But this clarity brings another realization, one that can feel unsettling at first. If projections shape so much of your experience, then avoiding self-awareness comes at a cost. And that cost doesn't disappear quietly. It comes back as something else entirely. There's a hidden price you pay when you refuse to look inward. It doesn't arrive as a bill or a warning. It shows up as repetition. Same conflicts, different faces, same mistakes, new settings. Carl Jung said it plainly. What remains unconscious does not vanish, it returns as fate. And when life feels like it's happening to you, it's often because an unseen part of you is steering the wheel, not out of malice, but out of neglect. Think of the unconscious like an autopilot programmed years ago. If you never update it, it keeps flying you into the same emotional turbulence. You might change cities, jobs, relationships, even identities, but the inner script keeps running. That's why some people swear they're unlucky in love, stuck financially, or doomed to chaos. In reality, the pattern isn't external, it's internal, waiting to be made conscious so it can be rewritten. You can see this clearly in relationships. If you keep attracting the same type of partner, the same emotional dynamic, the same ending, that's not coincidence. That's an unconscious contract being fulfilled. Or think about work. If every job ends in burnout, conflict, or dissatisfaction, it's worth asking what inner belief or fear is being reenacted. Awareness doesn't fix everything overnight, but it breaks the spell of blind repetition. And breaking that spell is freedom. Here's a simple but powerful exercise. Look at one recurring problem in your life and trace it backward. Ask yourself, when did this pattern first appear? Not intellectually, emotionally. What age? What environment? What feeling? Write it down. You're not trying to relive pain. You're trying to locate the root. Books like Memories, Dreams, Reflections by Jung can help you understand how early experiences quietly shape adult destiny. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's where things get uncomfortable, in a productive way. Because now, responsibility shifts. Fate no longer feels like a mystery. It feels like a message. And the moment you realize that your unconscious has been writing your story, another question emerges naturally. What happens when you choose to walk into that darkness on purpose, instead of being dragged there by life? Most people only meet their darkness when life corners them. Loss, betrayal, burnout, or failure. But there's another way, a braver way. Instead of waiting to be pushed, you choose to descend. You turn inward deliberately, knowing full well it won't be comfortable. This is not self-destruction, it's self-initiation. When you walk into the inner darkness on purpose, you stop being a victim of your psyche and start becoming its conscious partner. Think of it like entering a cave with a lantern instead of falling into it blind. The cave is the same either way, but your experience changes completely. When you choose the descent, fear turns into curiosity. Resistance turns into information. You begin to notice that the darkness isn't endless. It's structured. It has symbols, memories, emotions, and stories waiting to be decoded. And every step you take inside builds psychological strength you can't fake. You don't need extreme rituals or dramatic gestures to do this work. Start small and honest. Sit in silence for 10 minutes without distractions and notice what thoughts rush in. That's the unconscious knocking. Or revisit a memory you've avoided, not to relive it, but to observe it with adult awareness. Ask yourself, what did this moment teach me about myself? Practices like reflective journaling, dream tracking, or even slow reading, books like The Red Book or modern interpretations of depth psychology, help translate darkness into insight. Here's the paradox most people miss. Avoidance amplifies fear, while presence dissolves it. The moment you stop running, the monster shrinks. That anxiety you've been dodging, it often carries intuition. That sadness you suppress, it often carries meaning. When you approach these states consciously, they stop hijacking your behavior. You're no longer reacting, you're responding. And that shift alone can change how you show up in relationships, work, and decision-making. As you keep entering this inner terrain, something subtle but powerful happens. The darkness stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like guidance. You realize it's not trying to trap you, it's trying to transform you. And just when you begin to feel more grounded in this process, another symbol rises naturally from the depths, one that speaks not just of struggle, but of renewal. The serpent doesn't run from the earth, it lives close to it. That's why this symbol appears again and again when the psyche speaks in images. The serpent represents instinct, truth without decoration, wisdom that doesn't ask for permission. When Jung described the struggle of the two serpents, he wasn't talking about good versus evil. He was pointing to something far more unsettling, the confrontation between who you think you are and who you actually are beneath the surface. Unlike symbols of purity or heroism, the serpent doesn't pretend. It sheds its skin when it no longer fits. No nostalgia, no apology. Growth, in this sense, isn't about becoming someone new. It's about letting an old identity die. And this is where people get stuck. You might want change, but you cling to the skin that once protected you. Old roles, old stories, old defenses. The serpent teaches you that transformation requires release, not just insight. Look at your own life. How many versions of you have already died? The person you were at 15, at 25, before a heartbreak, before a major failure. Each time something fell away, and something sharper emerged. The problem is, when shedding happens unconsciously, it feels like loss. When it happens consciously, it feels like renewal. That's the difference integration makes. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what no longer fits who I'm becoming? Here's a grounded way to apply this. Identify one identity you're still gripping tightly, maybe the strong one, the nice one, the rational one, or even the broken one. Ask yourself what that identity once protected you from. Then ask what it might be preventing you from becoming now. This isn't about rejection, it's about evolution. Reading symbolic works or even observing recurring images in your dreams can reveal what your psyche is ready to shed next. As you begin to release these outdated skins, something surprising happens. You don't feel weaker. You feel lighter, more flexible, more real. The inner truth represented by the serpent isn't cruel, it's efficient. It clears space for something larger to emerge. And as this inner truth stabilizes, another realization quietly forms in the background. Becoming whole doesn't mean becoming flawless. In fact, it means the opposite. Perfection is a seductive lie. It promises safety, approval, and control, but it quietly fractures you inside. Wholeness, on the other hand, doesn't care about appearances. It cares about integrity. Carl Jung made this distinction clear. The self emerges not when you eliminate contradictions, but when you can hold them without collapsing. Becoming whole means allowing opposites to coexist within you without forcing a verdict. Think of a stained glass window. From up close, it's broken into jagged pieces, colors that don't match, shapes that seem incompatible. But when light passes through, a coherent image appears. You are the same. Your doubts, strengths, fears, and contradictions aren't errors. They're fragments waiting for integration. Perfection tries to erase the pieces. Wholeness lets the light do the work. You've probably noticed how exhausting it is to maintain an image, always being strong, always being calm, always being right. That effort drains energy that could be used for growth. When you allow yourself to be complex instead of flawless, something relaxes inside you. You stop performing and start living. And ironically, people trust you more, not less, because authenticity carries a gravity that perfection never does. Here's something practical you can try this week. In one area of your life, consciously allow yourself to be imperfect but present. Speak honestly instead of flawlessly. Act thoughtfully instead of decisively. Notice how often your fear of making mistakes is really a fear of being seen. Wholeness asks for courage, not polish. And courage compounds faster than perfection ever could. As you grow into this integrated state, you begin to feel less split inside. Decisions become clearer, not because life simplifies, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. And in that inner alignment, another truth starts to surface, one that's both sobering and empowering. Wholeness has a price, and that price is pain you can no longer avoid. There's a kind of pain you can't bypass if you want a real life. Not the pain of chaos or trauma, but the pain of honesty. The moment you stop lying to yourself, things start to sting. You feel grief for the years you lived half awake. You feel anger at what you tolerated. You feel fear about who you might become if you stop playing small. This pain isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're finally touching something true. Most people confuse comfort with peace. They stay in familiar suffering because it feels predictable. Authenticity, on the other hand, feels unstable at first. It asks you to grieve old versions of yourself. It asks you to disappoint people who benefited from your silence. It asks you to sit with emotions you once numbed out. But this pain has direction. It's not random, it's corrective. Like resetting a bone, it hurts because it's aligning you properly. You've probably felt this at turning points in your life. The moment you knew a relationship was over before it officially ended. The moment a career path lost its meaning. The moment you realized you were living someone else's expectations. Those moments hurt precisely because they mattered. Pain, in this sense, is not punishment. It's information. It tells you where life is asking you to grow up emotionally and spiritually. Here's how you work with this pain instead of running from it. When discomfort arises, don't immediately distract yourself. Sit with it and ask, what truth is trying to surface right now? Maybe it's a boundary you need to set. Maybe it's a desire you've been downplaying. Maybe it's a fear you've been outsourcing to excuses. Writing these insights down grounds them in reality and turns suffering into self-knowledge. As you stay with this process, something shifts. The pain doesn't vanish, but it loses its bitterness. It starts to feel purposeful, even clarifying. You realize you're no longer suffering instead of living. You're suffering towards something real. And in that clarity, another threshold quietly appears. A moment when integration stops being an inner process and starts shaping how you move through the world itself. There comes a moment, quiet, almost anticlimactic, when you realize something fundamental has shifted. You're no longer reacting the way you used to. Situations that once hijacked your emotions now feel manageable. Not because life got easier, but because you became more integrated. This is the moment Carl Jung described as the emergence of the self, the inner authority that arises when your light and shadow stop fighting for control and begin working together. Think of the psyche like a kingdom that's been ruled by committees, fear shouting orders one day, desire the next, old wounds pulling strings behind the scenes. Chaos feels normal there. But when integration happens, leadership consolidates. The self doesn't silence the voices. It listens to all of them and decides anyway. You stop being fragmented. You act with a strange calm that doesn't come from certainty, but from inner alignment. You'll notice this shift in very practical ways. You say no without guilt and yes without resentment. You choose based on meaning, not impulse. You feel less pulled to prove yourself and more focused on expressing yourself. Even your mistakes change. They become cleaner, more honest, easier to learn from. This isn't superiority, it's coherence, and coherence is magnetic. A simple practice reinforces this state. Before important decisions, pause and ask, does this come from fear, image, or alignment? Over time, you'll recognize the tone of the self. It's not loud. It doesn't rush. It feels grounded, spacious, and quietly firm. The more you listen to it, the stronger it becomes. This is how individuation stabilizes, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. And yet here's the paradox. The moment the self takes the throne, the journey doesn't end, it deepens. Integration is not a finish line, it's a new way of walking. With awareness comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes choice, and that choice opens the door to the very question this entire journey has been circling around from the beginning. Now, it's on you. Insight alone doesn't transform a life. Application does. You've seen how the shadow works, how the unconscious shapes your fate, and how wholeness emerges not by erasing darkness, but by integrating it. So the real question isn't whether this is true. The real question is, what are you going to do with what you now see? Awareness is a door. Walking through it is a choice. Take a moment and look at your own life honestly. Where are you still reacting instead of choosing? Where are old patterns quietly repeating themselves? Which emotions do you keep numbing, judging, or projecting onto others? Integration begins with small, deliberate acts. Pausing before reacting, questioning your triggers, listening to what discomfort is trying to teach you. These moments may seem simple, but they compound into real inner authority. Ask yourself this: what part of me have I been calling dark simply because I didn't understand it? And another, even more confronting one: what would change in my life if I stopped fighting myself and started integrating myself? You don't need to become someone else. You need to become more of who you already are. consciously, responsibly, and fully. This work isn't easy, but it's honest. And an honest life has weight, meaning, and direction. If this message resonated with you, it's because something inside you is ready to come into the light. Don't ignore that signal. Stay with it. Work with it. Let it change how you see yourself and the world. If you want to keep going deeper into these ideas, into psychology, symbolism, and the hidden architecture of the mind, subscribe to the channel Mind's Silent Echo and activate notifications. This journey doesn't end here. It only gets more real from this point on.